So you've booked your cruise and the countdown has begun. There are some critical things you're going to need to do in the months and days leading up to your cruise. From prepping your travel documents to planning for shore excursions, we've got you covered in this video. I'll share a checklist of really important things that you should be doing in the 90 days, 60 days, and 30 days leading up to your cruise. So stay tuned. Let's talk about it. So let's start off with those things that you should do 90 days before your cruise. Now, certainly some of these you can do earlier, but these are things that I would recommend having done at that 90-day point. So the first thing is, if you haven't already, pay off your cruise. I believe most cruise lines require that final payment to be made roughly 75 days before your cruise, but definitely be looking at that by the 90-day mark to make sure there's no chance of your cruise being canceled due to non-payment. The next thing I recommend that you do, again, if you haven't already, is to download the Cruise Lines app on your phone. The Cruise Line app has a lot of great information about your upcoming cruise, but you can also use that to check in for your cruise. The next thing to do, kind of 90 days out, again, if you haven't done so already, is to book your flights if you need to fly into the departure city. Similarly, if you're flying in, we always recommend that you fly in the day before your cruise, just because sometimes there are travel delays and you would hate to miss your cruise. So you'll want to book your pre-cruise hotel for that night. The next activity you'll want to do 90 days out is check in for your cruise. On most cruise lines, at that 90-day point before your sailing date, you are able to check in for your cruise. And for me, this is when the excitement really starts to build. Paid off the cruise and I'm checking in for the cruise. It's happening. So I really love being able to check in for the cruise. You can do that on the Cruise Lines app or on their website. Along with that excitement of checking in for your cruise, this is when I recommend you start to make your packing list. So you know what things you have from home that you can bring in terms of clothing and toiletries, but also what things you might need or, let's face it, want to buy. So start making that packing list. I do have one that I used for our last cruise. It's obviously female focused, but you can change it around and it can work for a man. I'll link that below in case that's helpful for anyone. All right, the last activity I have at the 90-day point is, if you haven't already, definitely consider purchasing travel insurance. You just don't ever know, right? And you would hate to have lost out on that money for your cruise if there were some sort of emergency that caused you to miss the cruise. So definitely look at purchasing trip insurance. And when you're doing that, definitely look at the medical component of that. That's always the piece I'm kind of most concerned with, that if, God forbid, something were to happen to Will or I when we're on the cruise or on an excursion, do we have enough medical coverage to get us back home to the States if we need to? Hi everyone, Future Katie here. As I was editing this video, I realized I left off 3 points on my 90-day checklist. So I'm just popping in here to quickly cover those. So the first has to do with a passport. And really, I recommend that you look at this when you book your cruise and really before the 90-day point, but it was too important not to include somewhere. And that is to make sure that your passport will be valid for 6 months beyond the last day of your cruise. If it's not, you could be denied entry onto the ship, so it's a really important point. Now, I know typically passport processing times are around 8 to 12 weeks, but I have read over the last year that a lot more people are traveling internationally after the pandemic, and that those times have been longer than that. So I definitely recommend that you don't wait until the 90-day point to look at that. But if you do find that you have to renew and you're 90 days out, I definitely would recommend that you pay for the expedited processing. Also, at that 90-day point, if you haven't done so already, I would recommend that you book any shore excursions you want to take, whether those are ship-sponsored excursions or if you're booking on your own. A lot of those excursions do book up quickly, and so you would hate to miss out on your first or second choice. So I definitely recommend doing that at this point. Along with excursions, I definitely recommend that you take some time to research your ports of call. Maybe you're doing a ship-sponsored excursion, but that's only going to be like a 3-hour tour, and you've got several more hours in port. You may want to look at what are some of the best places to eat, what are the best sites to see, historical or otherwise. And so, taking that time to research those ports can definitely really add value to your vacation. Places like TripAdvisor, Cruise Critic, those are great resources to use when you're researching what to do in those port cities. All right, back to regular programming. All right, let's talk about 60 days before your cruise. And I really only have a couple of things here, and they may not apply to you, but I thought they'd be worth mentioning. And that is if you're interested in booking specialty dining, I definitely recommend doing that at this point. Your preferred night might be sold out if you wait too long. So that's kind of the point where we're looking at it and making those reservations. The second thing at the 60-day mark is if, like us, you have pets, cats, dogs, or other, you want to make sure that you have made arrangements for a pet sitter, or in our case with our 2 dogs, we do board them at a kennel because we don't have family members that are able to care for them while we're on vacation. And especially if you're sailing over a holiday, those kennels and places that you board animals, they can actually sell out pretty quickly. So we like to make sure we've got that well in advance. We know how much it's going to cost and we can plan for that financially. By the way, I made a Google Sheet checklist, a physical checklist of all the things I'm talking about. So I will link that in the description box below, and I'll also pin it to the top of the comments. In case that's helpful for you, when you click on it, you'll just be asked to make a copy of it. So hopefully that's helpful to everyone. All right, let's turn our attention to that 30-day mark before your cruise. I have a lot of activities here for you to consider. And one of them you might not really have thought of, but for me, I like to try on the clothes that I plan to bring. My weight may have fluctuated. I may have gained weight, lost weight. Things may not be fitting how I want them to. So I don't want to wait until the last minute to discover that, or even wait until we're on the cruise and realize, oh, something doesn't fit. I don't have enough clothes. It's not likely with me. I'm a little bit of a cautious packer. But this is something I recommend. Make sure you're happy with everything you're bringing, and then you still have time to purchase something if you needed to. The next 30-day to do I have for you is if you've booked a private shore excursion, so not through the ship, I definitely recommend just reaching out to them to confirm. Like, yes, I'm still coming, making sure the time hasn't changed, and make sure you have all of the critical information, the meeting point, if there's special clothing or footwear requirements. The next 30-day activity I have for you is to purchase any necessary toiletries. So things like skincare and sunscreen can expire. So if you have some older ones, I definitely recommend checking those expiration dates and making any purchases of new items that you need for your cruise. Along the same lines, I like to check any medications I'm going to bring in my first aid kit. So I always pack just a little bag with some first aid items, again, just in case. So I like to make sure that any Advil or aspirin isn't expired, any other medications I'm going to bring. So I check those, buy any new ones that I might need to for that kit, and get those packed and ready to go. And then lastly, related to medications, I like to check my prescriptions just to make sure, number one, I'm able to refill my prescription so I have enough for my cruise. And if for some reason a prescription that you need is expiring, you have time, to get into your medical provider to get a new prescription. All right, the next thing to do at the 30-day mark is to print those luggage tags that are provided to you by the cruise line. Those are usually available by this point. And if you do plan to check any luggage at the cruise terminal, you will need the luggage tags for that. So print those off, have those ready to go. I like to pack those in my carry-on bag so I have them handy when I get to the cruise terminal. If this information is helpful, I hope you'll consider giving this video a like. And if you haven't already, I hope you'll subscribe and join the Making Waves family. The next thing I like to do at the 30-day mark is to place a hold on our mail for the time that we're going to be away. Now, you may have a family member or friend that you can contact to come by and pick up your mail for you. We usually just go to the United States Postal Service's website, enter our address, enter the dates we're going to be gone, and place a hold on the mail. Then once we're back, the mail that was held during that time will be redelivered to us. I also at this point like to contact our bank and credit card company to advise them of our travel plans so that if we do need to use our debit card or credit card to make a purchase while we're at one of the port stops, it won't be denied. So I just let them know the dates that we're going to be gone and exactly what countries we're going to be visiting. This next thing you can do at the 30-day point or any time before you sail, and that is to provide the emergency contact information for the ship or the cruise line to family members and friends. I like to do this just in case there's an emergency at home. My parents are elderly, and I want them to be able to reach out to us, if they need anything urgently. And so I always make sure to do this roughly at that 30-day point. The last 30-day activity I have for you, and this may not apply to everyone, but that is to check with your cell phone company on perhaps like a short-term international calling or roaming plan. We typically don't use our phones a lot in port, but you may. That may be something you want to do if you do plan to use your phone so you don't get hit with some really high fees. All right, so now we're less than 30 days. It's the most exciting time, and my favorite thing to do that gets me most excited for my cruise is it's time to pack. So I'll be honest, I start packing at that 30-day point, but really I recommend that you pack 1 to 2 weeks before your cruise, unless you're like my husband Will, who packs the night before at the latest possible hour. But I like to take this time to really make sure I've got everything well organized. I'm checking things off my packing list. So definitely recommend starting that, 30 days out, but certainly 1 to 2 weeks out is fine. Also, while you're packing, make sure that you have your boarding pass to get on the ship. So you can print that out and have that with you, or you can access it via the cruise line app. But either way, I just like to make sure I'm all good there and I've got that ready to go, typically in that 1 to 2 weeks before the cruise. Also, about a week before the cruise, I start to look at weather. Now, if you're cruising to the Caribbean, lucky you, the weather's pretty constant there. But if you're going to Europe or some other places where the weather might not be quite as predictable, I definitely recommend checking the weather up on your phone or a weather website and look at that kind of 10-day forecast to make sure you're packing accordingly. Also, in that 1 to 2 weeks before our cruise, I know we talked about travel insurance earlier. I like to make sure that I either have that information printed out and packed, or I have the contact information and all the pertinent details saved in my phone. Again, just in case something were to happen and I needed to reach out to them. One other thing I like to do before we head out on our cruise is to take a picture with my phone camera of our passports. So typically when we're on the cruise and we're stopping in those port cities and port countries, I don't like to take our passports with us. I typically just leave those in the safe in our cabin, but I like to have that picture so we have all the numbers with us in case there was some emergency and, for example, we missed the ship when it left and we needed to reach out to a U.S. consulate, we would have that information with us. The last thing I like to do in that 1 or 2 weeks before the cruise is to make sure that if I have booked independent shore excursions, I have printed out all of the details or have them saved on my phone or computer that I'm bringing with me, so I know exactly where the meeting point is, the contact number. Again, this is an emergency and I need to miss the excursion for some reason. I just like to make sure I have that handy. I hope this information was helpful. Did I miss anything important that you like to make sure you do in that 90 days leading up to your cruise? Please share it with us. We like to learn from you. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy cruising.